You hit record. And welcome back, everybody, to the second part of our double feature. This session is titled Tiles and Tales from Rapido Implementation, a Consortium Rapido Experience. Today is September 20th, 2023. The session is going to be, the speakers for the session come from 4 different Orbis Cascade Alliance institutions. The speakers are Rose Bosely, Jasmine Waters, Paul Gardner, David Ketchum, and Laura Hilterbrand. My name is Libby, and I'm the convener for this session. I will quickly repeat what I did the first time. The session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. Because they retain the copyright to the information they are presenting, they may choose to request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request to ILL. However, at this time, it is planned that the recordings will be made available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. To turn live captioning on, click the CC link at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitles. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A function in chat. And I will pose these to the presenter at the end of their presentation. We will not be monitoring the chat for questions. When the presentation ends, please complete the post-session survey in Whova, located in the conference homepage and the session chat. NWILL and presenters appreciate and use your feedback. And the link is actually dropped in chat correctly, and we'll do it again at the end. At that, I will turn the session over to the presenters. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Lori Hilterbrand. I'm the Resource Sharing and Fulfillment Program Manager for the Orbis Cascade Alliance. We're going to talk to you today a little bit about the experience we've had in our implementation of Rapido. We're going to be hearing from 4 of our member libraries: Portland State University, University of Oregon Libraries, Oregon Health and Sciences University, and Southern Oregon University Hannon Library. I want to thank my colleagues for being on this panel. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the Alliance. We are a Pacific Northwest consortium of 38 members. We're all academics, but we're all different kinds of academics, from community colleges all the way up to big R1 institutions. We adopted a shared ILS with Ex Libris' Alma and Primo back in 2012. So all of our members have that same library system running. We run a coordinated courier service across the Northwest that hits 250 libraries, which helps us with our delivery speeds and our shipping costs. And our member libraries have access to more than 20 million items through our shared catalog. So adding Rapido was an interesting idea, and we had 8 of our members, which is about 20% of our libraries, decide to go live. We're going to ask a series of 4 questions of our 4 panelists, and then when we're done, we're going to have some time for you to ask us some questions. I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves along with answering the first question. I'm going to start with the question of what prompted your institution to adopt Rapido, and we're going to turn this over to Southern Oregon University.
Thanks, Lori. I'm Jasmine. I'm the Resource Sharing and Fulfillment Lead at Southern Oregon University. We were one of the first to implement within the Orbis Cascade Alliance, having gone live in June 2022. We were prompted to move by a institution change from our storage system. We moved from a shared drive file storage system to a cloud-based file storage system. This led to some issues. We encountered some issues with Iliad, which really needs secure pathways, like those stable pathways on a computer. So we started looking for another system, a cloud-based system after that. We chose Rapido over other options because we really liked that you could place requests from directly within the catalog, no moving between sites or pages, as well as the fact that it would get rid of a whole system in our consortial resource sharing, and our national resource sharing would be happening within that same system. we also really liked how much information was presented to patrons from the outset. That's it from me, so I'm gonna pass this over to Paul.
Thank you, Jasmine. My name is Paul. I'm the Access Services Manager with OHSU. For us, adopting Rapido really started with when we adopted Rapid ILL back in 2019, really kicked it in early 2020, just in time for the pandemic. I don't think we really only got through those first few months of the pandemic, thanks in part to hard work on our staff and Rapid ILL. Through that kind of experience, we really thought about how, up until then, like Access Services handled our Summit consortial resource sharing, while a separate department, an ILL department, handled Iliad, even though each group of people were handling materials being borrowed and lent from other libraries. This process was creating like two different libraries where there's almost like what was held in Alma and the numbers and statistics there. And then the separate system of Iliad and just different procedures and processes. So we really wanted to bring things under one umbrella. There are a bit of cost savings involved with having, an ultimate goal of getting down to one system. And then just an emphasis on cross-training for coverage, not putting all of our needs onto one staff person for one thing, and being able to have more people being able to handle different areas. And then next it's off to Rose at PSU.
Great, thank you, Paul. My name's Rose Bosely. I'm the Access Services Manager at Portland State University. We had been considering retiring Iliad for a while. We were concerned about sort of its staying power and how long it would continue to be maintained. So we've been talking about it for some time. And then when we started having issues with our staffing levels during the pandemic, was a large motivator for us, the idea of moving to something new, something that would ideally be around for a long time. And then with increased automation, to sort of reduce the burden on staff, we were operating just with fewer people starting in 2020. So that was one of our major motivations. I'll pass it on to David next.
All right, thanks, Rose, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Ketchum. I'm the Director of Access Services at the University of Oregon Libraries. We implemented Rapido at UO throughout the fall of 2022, and we went live late December last year. And we decided to adopt Rapido for some of the same reasons as our peer institutions, like anticipated cost savings and improved user experience. And other factors for us were how unsustainable it had become to locally host and maintain our previous system, which we had been using since 2010, and increasing concerns from campus IT about the system's security and integrity in 2023. Also, Rapido, which we had been monitoring for some time, was becoming increasingly interoperable with other resource sharing technologies like WorldShare ILL and Iliad. And the global network of libraries upon which Rapido is built had grown to represent more than 1,000 libraries around the world. So it was arguably viable to support most of the resource sharing borrowing needs at UO, which was a priority for us. We also wanted and needed a next generation system capable of supporting our current resource sharing needs, not just to make the discovery and requesting process more intuitive and frictionless, but we also wanted a system that could potentially provide the infrastructure for newer services like controlled digital lending, and Alma and Rapido offered that for us. And finally, peer pressure. It did help that several Alliance colleagues decided to implement before and alongside UO.
Thank you so much, David. I'm going to pass this up to the second question, which is, what have been the benefits for your patrons and staff? Jasmine?
Thanks, Lori. So we've been live for a year and a few months now, and what we've seen is that for staff, The increased automation led to reduced handling of requests, both on borrowing and lending sides. So we're seeing that staff just process the requests less, sometimes not even seeing a request until it is delivered here at the library for us to get to the patron. We've also seen simplified analytics. With all the data being recorded in one system, you don't need to go to multiple places to really show what we're doing and how much we're processing each year. It's also smoothed the process of requesting for patrons. We see that there's less confusion between how our consortial and national interlibrary loan systems connect, including there's no redirect from our consortial requests to outside of our catalog with ILLiad when a request fails. So students aren't being passed around from system to system with different instances that they need to understand and be able to navigate. We've also seen increased discoverability for items within our catalog, increased ease of requesting because it's all in one system, and increased speed of delivery. I'm going to hand this back to Paul.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, we've seen a lot of the same benefits as what Jasmine mentioned. Speed of delivery, which already started with Rapid ILL, but continued with Rapido. We're an article-based institution at a health science library. Most of our articles get delivered, about half get delivered within a few hours upon being placed. A couple of other things that have been of benefit, having for patrons all of their requests viewable just under the My Library account has been a huge positive, where it used to be like, okay, you go to your library account for your loans from the library and summits, and then you go to ILLiad for your loans elsewhere. It's really nice for the patrons. Just you go to your library account, you can see what's checked out to you or the status of your article requests or whatever. For staff too, having almost everything viewable under the Alma patron account has been really nice. Articles, there's still a separate place staff has to go to view article status. And sorry, I'll add one thing that I forgot to add. It's been great being able to talk directly to McKeighen from the last presentation and have the regular meetings with her to kind of work through things. I don't think we've ever had that with another vendor. And thanks. And I'll hand it off to Rose at PSU.
Thanks, Paul. We've noticed a lot of the benefits already discussed. One thing that I think has been a pretty sizable change for us, because we're no longer using ILLiad and everything is now based purely in Alma. It genuinely makes our checkout process and customer service at the circulation desk has improved, because whereas we had fairly limited access at the circulation desk to ILLiad before, now it's very easy for student employees, staff who don't work in ILL to find out information about current requests and to easily check in and check out Rapido items just at the circulation desk, where it used to require more intervention from ILL staff with ILLiad training. So that in of itself has been a definite benefit, and it has overall, I think, drawn the separate staff we had for interlibrary loan and for our consortial borrowing, had them increase cooperation, problem solving, working together in something that used to be fairly siloed, even though we're all in the same unit. All right, David, take it away.
All right, thanks again, Rose. For UO patrons, I'd say, like the others, that one of the biggest benefits has been improvements in discoverability and ease of requesting. And for example, when compared to the same timeframe last year, January 1st through January 30th, UO patrons submitted 74% more borrowing requests with the Rapido only system than our hybrid system that used Alma resource sharing for Orbis Cascade Alliance ILL and ILLiad for non-Alliance ILL. And also, if you're wondering why we titled the session Tiles and Tails, it's because the users in Rapido are presented with very clear request tiles in Primo. for physical and digital versions of the material. And you can see that on the slide. You can also see from the slide the request form is more straightforward than what most of us are used to seeing. Our patrons at UO also appreciate managing all of their ILL requests within one system. And with Rapido, their requests have had a higher fulfillment rate, and they generally get material faster and for longer periods of time, which the others have mentioned. For employees, the Rapido system is more intuitive to navigate and learn and teach to others. And there's built-in mediation logic that streamlines workflow, and that wasn't possible in our previous system, or it required additional add-ons and services. And all ILL requests, which others have mentioned, are now managed through Alma, not Alma and Iliad. So next question, Lori.
All right. For our third question, I'm going to ask you, what have been the greatest challenges for your patrons and staff? Over to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Lori. So we did have several issues, particularly in the beginning. One of them was with our automation, actually. It led to decreased control. We were used to Iliad, where you do have a lot of control over how requests move through things, a lot of ability to fix maybe tiny user mistakes. There was a lot of confusion when things went wrong, and there was a learning curve as we transitioned. As well as particularly early in our adoption, there was we had an issue with our global title index, which is the index in the catalog that lists all of the books that other libraries are willing to lend. We were seeing duplicate items with bad or incomplete metadata attached, or just confusing items, like something listed as an ebook, but it had a physical request option on it. This has gotten better, but in the beginning it was pretty heavy, as we were really early adopters, so everyone was getting used to what we needed to do. We've also seen some issues with workflow differences between our partners on Aroda, which is our consortial lending, and those in the pods. These are mostly the same, but have very slight workflow differences, which has led to some frustration and confusion because we were already used to doing most of what we could do in Alma. From years of experience doing our consortial lending, we had to, it was almost exactly the same. So when we transitioned over, there was some friction as we had to do it only slightly differently. Another thing is actually relating to what David said about the tiles. The tiles are great. They're so great, actually, that they're very prominent and very easy for all of the patrons to see on their catalog, that we were getting a bunch of requests placed for things we had electronic resources for. Lori, if you wanted to switch that, thank you. We ended up implementing our own fix for this because our links weren't as vibrant and they weren't as eye-catching as these tiles. We decided to implement a fix that made it the download links for all of our electronic resources match the tiles so that they were easier, and we had more students and faculty and staff picking those first before going to interlibrary loan. Paul, you're good to go.
Thanks, Jasmine. We actually borrowed that solution that Southern Oregon University implemented for View Online. We thought it looked very great, and so we did the same thing, helping with some of our problems. For us to, in the Alliance, not going to get too much into the technical details here, but Alma, Ex Libris, they tend to think of things as either being a book, journal, or article, and then either available online or in print. At the Alliance, we split resource types like books into print books and ebooks, which are also then available certain ways. So this messes with a little bit of the functionality in Rapido. As mentioned in the period between the two sessions, there's no doc line integration. we're still being able to borrow stuff just fine, but it makes it tougher to be a partner lending to hospitals in the state. Again, just any sort of change requires a lot of communication, working with staff in all kinds of different departments, communicating needs and issues. It kind of changed up the way student workers and library techs at the desk have to loan items, although we think we figured out a solution thanks to help from McKeighen. Another kind of interesting problem that was maybe unique to us is that Iliad used mainly easy proxy to authenticate. We didn't think about this, but when we switched to Alma, there are a number of people that do work for OHSU that were maybe being expired in Alma. Not to get too into the weeds, but so people who had been borrowing articles and doing document delivery through Iliad for a while, all of a sudden we're getting denied. Some should have been denied, and it acted as a good catch for some stuff that was going on that we weren't aware of. But that was an interesting challenge that we did not anticipate. Then again, I want to talk about like the automation. It's so good that sometimes it feels like the only things staff are addressing are like the really complicated, hard to solve problems. And that can kind of create like a little bit of a morale challenge if you're losing the easy, satisfying drag and drop a PDF and you're just dealing with the weird things that come through. And then, yeah, we did a few changes to kind of make things a little easier in this slide up top. So normally in the Alliance, that top level where it's highlighted, it would say ebook. We just relabeled it to a book so that there'd be no confusion about, someone can we would get questions like, wait, why is it giving me the option to request a physical copy on an ebook and that sort of thing. So relabeling it to book kind of moved that along a little bit. One more kind of relabeling trick that helped us on the next slide. Thank you, Lori. Normally out of the box, this would say digital, which was causing all kinds of confusion with our patrons for some reason. So we just said request a PDF version, and that seemed to have fixed quite a lot of our issues, and things have been really smooth since those first few months. Next, I will hand it off to Rose.
Thank you. A lot of our challenges are things that have already been discussed, really things that were happening sort of at the consortial level that we all had to deal with. Things that were specific to PSU. Well, actually, like Southern Oregon, we also are only using Rapido and Rapid ILL for interlibrary loan. We are no longer using Iliad or OCLC resource sharing, which means that when we first implemented in November of last year, we saw a really steep drop in what we could borrow in terms of physical items. And that, like losing access to OCLC and then relying purely on Rapido pods for the first year or so has been extremely frustrating to a lot of our patrons, primarily our faculty patrons with specialized research needs, things that what we hear a lot is they feel that they can't get the things that they need anymore. And to a certain degree, some of that is true, is that we genuinely, things we may have been able to get for them before, we no longer have access to. And I think what has increased this perception is something that is actually a convenience, is that I think patrons are, when they're looking for something rare or unusual, they're getting to know faster because they're searching in our catalog for the item, and then they aren't able to find it, so it's much harder for them to request it. We do have a blank form, but that's sort of a long shot form for things like if it's not in Primo, we're probably not going to be able to get it for you through Rapido. And patrons are used to submitting a request, waiting a little while, and then hearing back from ILL staff that we couldn't get it. And something about that immediate, no, we can't get that for you, I think is very frustrating to patrons who want us to engage in like a search. They want us to be kind of doing detective work, hunting something down. And so it's been a real challenge. And in retrospect, I think that we should have done a lot more personalized outreach to our really frequent users with very specific research needs, because it's led to a lot of conflict and problems, and times when we need to rebuild trust with them because they feel that, well, we were under the idea that this would be easier for patrons to use, and it is for a lot of patrons. There are specific subsets of patrons who find the change very upsetting. So that was probably our major challenge. David?
All right, hello. I'd say that change, even the changes with positive outcomes that I mentioned earlier, has been the common challenge among patrons and employees at UO. And ironically, I'd say the discovery for ILO material, the requesting, the delivery, all of those things being integrated within the Primo system, even though it was in a lot of ways beneficial to our patrons, it's also confused them, especially at first. For example, they didn't understand why their ILO requests were not being sent to an external system like they were used to, or why they couldn't see all the bibliographic details in their request forms. And it took a while for our patrons and even employees throughout the library to figure out where to find the blank ILO request form if patrons didn't want to start their ILO process by searching Primo for whatever reason, or if Primo didn't recall any records for what they need. So unlike SOU, Southern Oregon University, we do hide the Rapido options if we've told the catalog that we own something and it's available, or if we've licensed access to digital content at UO. And our patrons frequently blame ILL for what's really electronic resource holdings issues. And so it's taken some time and it's been a little challenging to teach users the difference and how to report catalog problems, and also teaching library employees how to triage the problem reports so that ultimately patrons get the thing that they need as fast as possible, even if the Rapido tile doesn't appear in the search. The newness of the product has also been a challenge at UO for employees, especially related to troubleshooting. This is a new product for us. It's a new product for everyone. So it's hard to know or nail down whether something's really a problem or just a configuration issue or something like that. And because we've been using Alma resource sharing to manage Alliance interlibrary loan requests for the last 10 plus years at UO, there were some existing institutional and network configurations in Alma that didn't work great with how we needed to configure things in the system for Rapido. So similar to what was mentioned earlier about some conflicting workflow issues, also some conflicting in some cases configurations within the system. And so that's required employees at UO to be reactive and creative and patient with some things as we adjust to using the Alma resource sharing module for more than just Alliance lending and borrowing, which brings me, I think, to what I believe are the top two challenges for employees at UO. And that's the limited interoperability of the system at this time, and also reestablishing partnerships and networks. So I mentioned Rapido. One of the reasons we got it was because it was interoperable, and it can talk to and receive messages from external systems, but it can't do it in all the ways that we need it to. And this has had some negative impacts on our operational efficiencies. And ultimately, libraries in the Rapido network, it is a very large network, but it can't fulfill all of our borrowing requests quite yet at UO. And so we have been relying on WorldShare ILL to help fill this gap, but we're set to sunset WorldShare later this year. And it's been challenging to figure out how to make broker systems talk to each other and start building these partnerships and networks outside of WorldShare and beyond Rapido and the Alliance. Next question, Lori.
All right, thank you, David. Sorry about that little blip. My finger got twitchy. So the last question that we're going to have centrally is, what is next for your institution and Rapido? And I'm going to start us off again with Jasmine.
Thank you, Lori. So we're SOU is in a really good place with our implementation of Rapido. We've been on it for, like I said previously, we've been on it for over a year now, and we've seen a lot of the transitionary issues we've had where we're learning curves and things that needed to be reworked and rethought of. We've seen a lot of those even out. So now we're looking to connect with more potential partners and expand and solidify our workflows and services. Some of the things we're looking to do is we recently confirmed to connecting with RapidR libraries. We're right now just starting with borrowing, but we're going to expand to lending soon as well, which should help with, as we've mentioned, Rose, I know for sure mentioned it. We have had some issues getting everything we need from physical processing. Our electronic processing is wonderful and great, but physical processing is just a more limited pool. So this should help us connect with those. We also want to connect more with non-Rapido ALMA resource sharing partners through the use of hybrid pods. And we also just want to connect back with our old partnerships, trying for ISO connections between other systems, that interoperability that has been mentioned before. We'd really like to establish some partnerships again with some of our old long-standing ILL partners that we just haven't been able to connect with any other way than ALA requesting. So we're hoping to reestablish that in the future as well. I'm going to pass this on to Paul.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. We're in a similar spot as Jasmine, just adding partners. There's all kinds of like hybrid pods, and then just like single individual ones that, you know, we could potentially add through ISO. You know, and kind of from there, we're going to evaluate our current systems. And we weren't so bold as to just rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of Iliad. But now I'm starting to think we might want to do that, but we still want to look at, you know, what's available to us and what the impacts would be. And yeah, then just kind of refining our processes and further cross-training. And Rose?
Very similar for PSU, except for, well, let me put this, when I wrote this slide, I was feeling pretty positive, but in a couple of weeks since, we've actually started borrowing through RapidR, which is one of our goals, is like Paul and Jess mentioned, trying to find more partners, hybrid pods. We joined RapidR, and we have been having some problems since then. I, in fact, while Megan was presenting, did have to submit a problem case to Ex Libris because we're getting some problematic lending requests this week. So we're still definitely in the growing pains phase. We're about, our 1-year anniversary will be in November, and I think we're still very much still figuring it out and working out some bugs and some problems that we're seeing. Part of which I think comes from switching to Rapido and RapidILL, both new to us at the same time. So it kind of magnifies the effect of feeling we are always trying to put out fires. But yeah, I'm optimistic that once we get more folks, things will stabilize a little bit more. All right, David.
Thanks, Rose. At UO, we're also going to continue learning and refining our workflows and documentations. I mentioned that we plan to sunset WorldShare ILL in June this year. And so we are currently figuring out how to make our system talk with libraries outside of the ALMA network and establishing partnerships. We're also actively participating in the Idea Exchange, which is where Rapido users submit and vote on development suggestions. And Megan mentioned this in her previous vendor presentation. Rapido is a brand new project and there are limitations. Some of them, you know, we've shared in this presentation. And so participating actively in the development process is really important for us. Over the last several weeks, we've been assessing the impact of moving to Rapido, and we'll continue to do so, and also share our experience with others in the professional community that are interested in learning more.
All right, I think it's time for some questions from the attendees. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you all can put your faces back up and people can see you when you're talking. And I think we heard that Libby was going to address the questions and answers.
I am indeed. So this is a reminder that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll start from the top. So do you just accept that you won't be able to get rarer items now, or is there some other avenue you use to get those items?
I feel like this maybe is a good one for me since this is what I was complaining about the most. To a certain degree, yeah. We are working really hard with our acquisitions folks to try and purchase some things that folks really need. Then, if we purchase it, add it to our collection, then it's part of Summit, and obviously it's or part of the Orbis Cascade consortium. So we are increasing access for everybody for things that aren't available elsewhere. But obviously it isn't always possible to add something to the collection. We're just trying to plug away and keep adding more pods, more hybrid pods, more partners as we can. Unfortunately, at PSU, we have sort of a limited number of people with ALMA expertise, right? For the past couple of years, I'm always worried when I'm the person who knows the most about ALMA in a room. That's not a good sign. So, and I get that a lot these days. So that's a special barrier for us, is that it takes us a little longer to do anything because we're lacking support for the ALMA, the configuration side of things.
I do see
David.
Sorry, Rose, I did not mean to interrupt you. I see that David has his hand up. No more?
No, I do. I was just going to add to Rose at UO. Of course, we've been using WorldShare ILL to fill in the gap. I mentioned that. We have also decided another strategy is using some of the cost savings from switching products toward expanding our purchase on demand program. So we know that we're not going to have the network of libraries with the infrastructure that's been built over the past several decades through other systems. So, and we know that it's going to take a while to get what we need from the Rapido and ALMA networks. So yes, we are going to build out, like Rose said, peer-to-peer partnerships and things like that. And another strategy that we've taken is expanding our purchase on demand program.
Okay. Question number 2. My library uses NCIP to export requests from Rapido to Iliad as last resort. How different is this from using ISO to export request? Are there advantages to using ISO instead?
I think that question may have been a holdover from Megan's presentation, and it may be one that would be hard for us to answer. I would say one thing that I do know is if you're talking about ISO partnerships in the way of talking about peer-to-peer resource sharing and just picking a partner out of the community partners list, there's some initial setup there that can be time consuming. But the thing to know is that you're front loading most of the effort, and at the point you already have them in as a partner, those transactions are a lot easier. The NCIP really just throws it in as last resort, like, caveat, nobody has it, do you have it? So it's kind of a guessing game instead of a direct, I know you've got the item.
And yes, that was for Megan. Unfortunately, Megan has left, so hopefully she'll come on to here and give more information for that question later. How do you handle requests to and from Orbis members who don't use Rapido?
I can take this one. So we've been using our network zone ROTA for many years, and it has stayed the same. What we do is here at SOU, we have our pods and list of priority. And we've prioritized instead what we call a locally managed pod, which is something, whereas pods for like the US pod and the US West pod, which are Rapido pods, those are all managed by Ex Libris, and they add you to them We created our own local pod that only we can see that involves all of the people in our rota, which Lori manages. So thank you very much, Lori, for doing that for us. But that pod is at the top of our priority. It checks all of our summit institutions first, and we process it exactly as we have since the beginning of using Summit and doing this. Everything remains the same. The actual differences have been between Summit institutions lending in Rapido, who are both on Rapido. There we've seen some issues, and maybe I'll let David talk about that because he's seen a lot of it.
I don't know if I have much more to add, Jasmine. Yes, the configuration of ALMA resource sharing allows us in the Alliance to still prioritize our alliance partners, which is in a pod, a locally managed pod, as Jasmine mentioned. And there were some issues because not all libraries in the Alliance are Rapido. And so we've had to do a little bit of hacking on the back end of the system to make sure that requests are prioritized the way that we would like them to be in the Alliance, which is we want to go to our regional consortial partners first as much as we can, and then move on to the other libraries and the other Rapido or locally managed pods.
I'd like to add just a little to that, if I may. One of the issues that we saw that was unexpected, and kind of what Jasmine and David are both referring to, is that, you know, although we're able to run things pretty much as it has been for our consortial borrowing, the 8 institutions that adopted Rapido are also borrowing and lending from each other as part of that consortial borrowing. And the problem that it is in existence, and the way McKeighen explained it to us, is that the 2 locates work differently. So an ALMA rota works differently for manual locates or systematic locates than does Rapido. So often we would see a request that would roll out of our local resource sharing, and then it would go straight to the US West pod because we finally just put in a little 8 library pod that caught the 8 of us that are in Rapido together. And that solved the issue. It's a little complex, but it worked quite well.
I'm going to jump in very quickly. McKeighen put an answer to the ISO question in chat, so I will read her answer. She said, I see the question in ISO and Iliad. There are libraries who are using both Rapido and Iliad connecting via NCIP. ISO connections are being used for a Rapido library to connect directly with another library that is using Iliad. So I just wanted to put that in there. Next question, and this one was transferred from the Zoom Q&A. What makes the delivery of physical items so much faster in Rapido as opposed to another system?
Magic.
I mean, I would say one thing, it's just there's less touching of a request by different people. Obviously, like Rapido's not going to make USPS ship the item any quicker, but you know, less mediation, you know, more the cross training I referenced earlier. It allowed it so that, you know, more staff can process and receive an item. So, you know, you don't have to wait for your ILL department to do just like a basic receive or something like that. So it kind of, when we talk about that, it's like it gets the book on the whole shelf quicker, you know. So I think that's the main way for that, for physical items. Oh, go on.
To expand on that, the lack of mediation is on both sides. So like if everything goes through, like there's no missing information, the system will just go through partners and locate who has it available and send it to them immediately. Whereas when we were working with Iliad, we could never see who had it available. So we just had to go through our own created like lists of people and hope that someone didn't have it checked out. And because of that, we're getting the first person it goes to much more often is able to fill it than when we were on Iliad. As well as it's in our ILS already. So we don't have to do a lot of stuff to port those requests over to our ILS. Like Paul was saying, less touching, faster on the hold shelf.
And another thing I'll add to that, the automation does speed up the operational handling, but we've also all decided to deliver material to partner libraries within the pods that we've become members of within a specified amount of time. So for those who are familiar with RapidR outside of the context of Rapido, you know that if you join the Cosmo pod or the US Northeast pod or whatever, you've got to deliver those things within a specified amount of time, which is usually 7 days to the partner library. So that's another factor, is that expedited shipping comes into play when you're lending to Rapido partners.
Quick, easy question. Are all of the Orbis Cascade members using Rapido as their primary ILL system?
No, this one's just a
No.
quick one. There's 38 Alliance libraries, and there are 8 of our members who have adopted Rapido. So it's about a 20% uptake.
And we do just have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to move quickly. You mentioned purchasing things that you can't find in Rapido. Does that defeat the purpose of switching to Rapido from a cost savings perspective? Or do the savings outweigh the purchasing cost?
I think I was the one who brought this up, but if anybody else wants to.
I can say for us, because we actually implemented a very similar system with that Rose mentioned, because Rapido is agreeing completely that we're lending for free. And most of the books we can't get are actually just really new books, and they're not actually that rare. They're just not owned by a lot of libraries yet. We're able to purchase them for less than $30. And maybe they're already hardcover, so they don't need to be bound. And so it's faster and easier to purchase them, and we're still spending less because we're not, a lot of our lending is just happening for free. So a lot of the cost savings come from that free lending as well.
Anything to add?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. We don't have a lot of time. Go ahead.
Just really quickly, and presenters, you will be able to go on to this Q&A after the session is over and give more detailed answers to these questions. So everybody watching, please do look for that. Do Rapido print out an ILL slip that you wrap around the book, or does it look more like a summit request slip?
It looks like more like a summit request slip. It uses the Alma letters. I'll say our staff has had some fun coming up with something that both in combination with the Alliance and like work Lori and our little Rapido group's doing, and then like staff on site to like kind of mimic that visual aid of having a book band that wraps around the cover. So
I'll give a little shout out to CSU. They've got some really great letters, and they do have an explanation of what letters they've used to convert into a book band, which we have used, and we do use a book band. It prints out a specific letter that does that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. I have posted into the chat the link for our after session survey. Please do fill that out. It provides very useful information for the presenters and the committee alike. And I will see you all tomorrow. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, everyone.